Britain has been gripped by moral panic over the last few years about the radicalisation of young men. There was the psychodrama around Netflix's Adolescence that race-swapped the protagonist. There was the Cabinet Office monitoring Andrew Tate clips and misogynistic influencers, classing incels as a form of terrorism. And then there have been the recent documentaries that have flopped, like Louis Theroux's documentary on the manosphere, and, of course, Ross Kemp's ill-fated documentary on incels, where William Costello debunked all of his misapprehensions that incels are largely right-wing young men. It's actually quite the opposite. So all of this has been a thin veneer, a cover for the institutionalized, regime-endorsed radicalization of young women against men, and the political poisoning of women against their own personal interests to convince them to project the compassion they usually reserve for their own children, their elderly relatives, their immediate family, their concern for their community, their being custodians of standards and culture, onto hypothetically marginalized minority groups, foreign men that wish to do them harm, and conflicts in faraway lands that shouldn't concern them. And this has made women despondent, lonely, depressed, feeling they have no hope for the future, even though they're the hypothetical beneficiaries of this empowered, free, feminist culture and economy. And so the New Statesman have released a series of polls and interviews with these young women, detailing the extent of this radicalization. And the New Statesman was once an outlet synonymous with insufferable Laurie Penny-esque 2010s feminism. And now this is kind of like a confession, saying, we played a part in this, and the fruits of our labour are that young women are miserable and have a favourable view of race communism, and are, if they were the only ones voting, would elect a green supermajority that would essentially destroy the country. I'll allow Scarlett Maguire, who conducted the polling, who does very good work actually for Merlin Strategy, to summarise this in the first minute of this New Statesman podcast.
Scarlett, you conducted the exclusive polling for this piece, and there are some really fascinating results. One of the starkest findings was how negatively young women feel towards men compared with the other way around. Can you unpack some of the stats for us, please?
Yeah, I think out of everything we found, this is what jumped out the most to me. I think we're very used to hearing about young men's negative views of young women's and sort of misogyny amongst young men. But this really struck me because we found that 72% of young men have a favourable view of young women, 7%, so not very many really, have an unfavourable view of young women. When it comes to women under 30, though, only 50% have a favourable view. The unfavourable view of men goes up to 21%, and then under 25 women, it's just 35% of young women who have a favourable view of men. And if you go into very favourable, we actually use positive rather than favourable, but if you say very positive, it's just 11% of under 25 women. So we are looking at an environment where young women feel a lot more negatively towards young men than the other way around.
So 89% of women under 25 are either indifferent or hate men. That's not sustainable. It obviously has a political impact, but this means that it's going to be nigh on impossible for many of those women to form healthy, functioning relationships, to have families, despite the majority of them, when polled, saying that they want children. This is going to end up in a number of personal tragedies for all of these women. And a lot of these women are English women, white, native women. Therefore, I think they deserve our care and concern, because they're our extended family members. They're our friends, our sisters, our daughters. Some of you might be thinking future wives. And so we really do have to heal this divide, because there's been a lot of commentary about these polls, because they're shocking. And a lot of it has been tainted with the, well, they get what they voted for, derision. And a lot of women at the time didn't want this. Back when the seeds of feminism, the knotweed of feminism around our culture was germinating, most women were not in favour. We have the interviews, we have the polling from the time. Women's happiness has gone down over time as this egalitarian, individualistic, man-hating version of feminism has become the dominant strain, inflicted on a majority of women by a resentful minority. And so I do think that if you know women like this who have been led astray, who have been turned against their own self-interest, I mean, you know, I've met women like this, it's important that we hear their concerns out and then we point out to them how their beliefs are not going to make them happy, are not going to give them the ends that they desire, and then point out to them who did this to you. Because if you're not benefiting from your beliefs, someone is. And so who is benefiting from your misery? Anyway, this is Scarlett's polling that was published in the New Statesman. As you can see here, as she said, 72% of men under 30 say they have a positive view of the opposite sex, compared with just 50% of women of the same age. 38% of men say they feel very positively towards women, while only 18% of women say the same about men. This is particularly pronounced among women under the age of 25, of whom just 35% feel positively towards men. More than 4 in 10 of the women surveyed said men did not have the same understanding of consent in sexual relationships that they did. 25% of men thought the same. This is an interesting point. The disparity in understanding what men and women want in a relationship, I think, is a result of the sexual revolution. This is a result of hookups, or situationships as they're now colloquially known, where women will spend indefinite amounts of time in emotional limbo, hooking up with a man, and then telling themselves that if they are emotionally invested in him, if they catch feelings, as the phrase pathologizes it like a disease, then they're the ones in the wrong, but they're living contrary to their nature. Just live according to your nature and you'll be much happier. Don't expect to sleep with a man and not get attached to him. And when they do that, and they do get attached, then that isn't reciprocated, because men just think, okay, well, if she's sleeping with me like I would, therefore she must think like I would, therefore she must not be emotionally attached, and this is just low-cost sex for me. Then she thinks the man doesn't understand her, doesn't appreciate her. He isn't basically reading her mind, which is what women want, and even though we joke about that, they want to be the primary object of concern in your life. And if she doesn't feel that that's the case, then she'll feel that you have exploited her, even though you have both rationally consented to this arrangement. And the mismatch here is that men are mistreating women insofar as they think that men and women act the same or are equal. And women have been told that that's the case, but whatever the rational cope is insufficient to overpower the natural disparity in how men and women feel and think and behave. And so women feel exploited because the men haven't committed to them. And so that's what I think this is. Anyway, young women are twice as likely as young men to say they would not like to have children. That's 15% compared with 8%. And among young white women under 30, this increases to 1 in 5. This is actually pretty similar over in the United States. So this was a poll released in September of 2025. And this is about Gen Z's gender divide on marriage, children, and what constitutes a successful life. And as we can see in the table down here, even among female Republican voters, having a job or financial independence is more important than having a family. So the number one priority for women who voted Democrat in 2024 is having a job or career you find fulfilling. Same for men who voted for Harris, but they're just women anyway. Women who voted for Trump say achieving financial independence is their most important priority, and having children is their 6th. Whereas for men who voted for Trump, having children is their 1st priority, and being married is their 4th, compared to women for whom being married is their 9th. So even among women who are ostensibly on the right, there are still intractable, liberal, feminist, ultimately market-oriented desires rather than family-oriented desires. And I think this is the great trick that neoliberalism played on women. It's to say that your hours put into filling out spreadsheets for a soulless corporation that will replace you with cheap foreign labor is more important than the work that you do to maintain your happy marriage, your household, your family, to be a matriarch of your extended community, to be loved. The corporation isn't going to gather around your bedside when you pass away, but you know, my grandmother died a couple of months ago. She had 4 children. She had 6 grandchildren. And, you know, I read the eulogy at a funeral that I wrote. We all gathered. We visited her in hospital. You won't have that if you don't have a family around you. the state will just consider you a cost to be offset on the balance sheet. The corporation won't it won't do anything for you that hurts its bottom line. It will tell you to put your things in a box and get out the moment it has to make cuts to the HR department. So these women have their priorities wrong. And I'm not saying they have their priorities wrong in order to meet the expectations of men. I'm saying they have their priorities wrong just because they will be more miserable and they're already self-reporting their misery. And so this is sad. This is something that needs to be rectified. And current political arrangements will not rectify this. 1 in 4 young women say their partner having different political views to them would be a red flag in a relationship. Contentious. I actually agree with this. I would not get into a marriage with someone that you disagree fundamentally with on moral, political, or philosophical matters, because you will fight over how to raise your children, how to discipline them, which is very important. Just the vision of the good life that you would like to build. The problem here is not that there are disparities between potential spouses in what they might agree with politically, and that relationships aren't forming because they might disagree politically. It's that men are far more politically sensible than women are, because women have been radicalized far to the left, and they project their compassion out onto men masquerading as refugees that would like to do them harm, whereas their own men in their own domestic society that behave much better and actually have really warm feelings towards them, they pathologize them as a threat. And they also can't disaggregate dangerous men from men on the whole, and so their threat detection in any given scenario is not adequately strong, and so they will end up endangering themselves. And we know this has happened time and time again with just the number of migrant sex crimes that enter the headlines every day now. 6 in 10 say they would find it difficult to date someone who disagreed with them on the Israel-Palestine conflict, or who did not share their views on Donald Trump. You're English. Sorry, I don't think that your opinion on what Donald Trump has said today, which you've just got from Twitter or an Instagram graphic, let's be honest, you haven't watched the full speech anyway, I don't think that's more consequential than whether or not a man will take care of you and get up if there's a bump in the night. You know, the women have been poisoned by believing that their views of abstract political matters that have no bearing on their day-to-day life are more important than forming relationships that are going to build families that see them through the rest of their life, when these political campaigns and corporations have forgotten about them. They've discarded them. Young women are also more likely than young men to say that they would not have a relationship with someone who disagreed with them over immigration. And this is because young men are anti-immigration and young women on the whole are pro-immigration, even though young women are the most at risk. Like, for example, these are the men that young women feel sympathetic for. And I'm being general here because this is how bad the polling is. Small boat migrant from Afghanistan kidnapped and assaulted a 7-year-old girl in a migrant hotel, and it turns out he worked for the Taliban. So he crossed the channel by small boat, abducted and assaulted a 7-year-old girl. He has been sentenced to just 2.5 years in prison. Bear in mind, the guy that also assaulted a Sikh woman has got life in prison. So I think just hang them both. Bring back the death penalty. But you can see the disparity here. If a man is a migrant and commits a crime against an English child, 2.5 years. Basically the same time that Lucy Connolly got for an ill-advised and deleted tweet during the Southport riots. Whereas if a white English man does it to a Sikh woman, which basically never happens, thank God, then it's suddenly life in prison. I mean, just... The intent is to import men that make life dangerous for English women. And the problem is, English women have been taught that it is compassionate to import those men, even when they're the most at risk. Anyway, he did it in West London. This is Afsar Safi. He arrived in Britain in 2021 and was residing at the accommodation when the offence took place last September. During sentence at Isleworth Crown Court, he disclosed his asylum application started because he had been associated with the Taliban from age 10. So this is a Taliban fighter who's been associated with them for going on, 15 years. And we decided to just put him up in a hotel for 4 years at taxpayers' expense. And he abducted a 7-year-old girl. He took the child to his hotel room where it occurred. And then during the trial, he said, I like children and she was a child. I asked her where she was going. She said she was waiting for her mother to go shopping. I kissed her to the face. I kissed her out of the love for children. Back home, all the people do that. I believe him. Back home, all the men like him do that to children. They do that to women. Why are we bringing them here? Because lots of young women are going to vote to import them. Bear in mind, the Green Party has internal party projections that their immigration policies, or lack thereof, their abolition of borders and treatment of migrants, illegal and legal alike, as citizens, as soon as they arrive, is going to bring in 5 million people a year. And they won't deport anyone, which means you're going to get millions more men like him, because millions more men like him do exist around the world. They're going to come into our country and target women. Like, we already know they're doing this. I helped break the story in 2023 that people smuggling gangs are secretly filming women on nights out when they're vulnerable, dressed immodestly by this barbarian standards, and they're posting it all over TikTok and Instagram to target men in Morocco and Algeria, now India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, to say these women are ready and available. They're basically vulnerable, and if you break into the country, they're just waiting for you. And this is what young women have been taught to support, and if a young man disagrees with them, then they're not going to have a relationship with him. Like, they're not going to get in a relationship with a young Englishman who wants to protect them from the migrants they're assaulting. Instead, they're going to remain single and keep voting to import the migrants. This is suicidal. It's horrible, the fate that is going to befall our young women if they aren't convinced otherwise. And I think a lot of this is they just want to be made to feel safe, and because they feel unsafe, they want everyone to be made to feel safe, and so they run to the state to demand that everyone be made safe. Financially, from offensive words. But what ends up happening is that very same state is the reason they're feeling unsafe, because they're importing men that target them. And they live with that cognitive dissonance, and that cognitive dissonance makes them feel miserable and anxious, and so they project their negative feelings out onto the people that point out that their worldview is incoherent, which is young men of the same age. And they think that it's just young men of their age who are not left-wing enough who are the only problem. And if they just went away, if they weren't in relationships with them, if they just stopped being such intolerant little incels, then the whole world would be harmonious and less dangerous, and they would feel safe. And I'm sorry, that's not how you feel safe. You feel safe by being looked after by a man who is capable of protecting you from dangerous freaks like this. The men of this generation are substantially more positive about capitalism, net 28%, or 28 points, whereas women view it with a +2 favourability rating, substantially less favourable than communism, +11. And this is, well, it shouldn't be surprising, but this is interesting, because the Centre for Social Justice, about 2 years ago now, in their Lost Boys report, it was early last year, found that the gender pay gap has inverted among men and women under 30. Women are out-earning men. Now, the gender pay gap didn't actually exist in the first place in the way that people thought. This won't be news to many of you, but it was comparing apples and oranges. It was comparing the sum total of men's earnings and the sum total of women's earnings, not adjusting for early retirement, time off, flexible working hours, profession, the fact that women, because they bear the physical burden of having and rearing children, is a wonderful thing, admirable, but very difficult, they take more time off work. And also men are just a bit more aggressive and disagreeable, and so they're more likely to ask for a raise. Now, this is a system which women have been systemically advantaged at the expense of young men. I mean, it was the Blair and Brown government where an overwhelming amount, I think it was like 75%, of the new jobs created in the civil service went to women. So women are filling state and corporate desk jobs like HR or information gathering, where the system isn't doing anything useful. It's actually, endangering them and prying them apart from their families and taking away time that they could have spent with their children and their friends and their extended community. And it's just funneling them into what is essentially adult daycare. And yet, I mean, they're being advantaged by this, hypothetically. You know, they're the ones getting the jobs and earning money. But they're miserable and they want communism. So the entire system is apparently geared towards their interest, geared towards their empowerment and enrichment, and yet they're still miserable, which means the system is the problem. The thing that you have been told is for your betterment is not. It's to impoverish you spiritually, emotionally, even while expediently lining your pocket with money that you can spend on more consumer goods or going out at night. And it's just not healthy. What is striking, as they say here, is the system is not working for them. What's striking is that young women under 30 are much less hopeful about their own financial future and goals than men of the same age. They are net 21 points less likely than men to say they are optimistic that they will earn more than their parents, and 19 points less likely that they will be able to buy the house that they want. Among 16 to 24-year-olds, there are more women in full-time work than their male counterparts, with the average woman of that age group earning 9% more than the average man. So, even though they're earning more, there's more single female first-time buyers than there are single male first-time buyers now in that age cohort, they're far less optimistic. They feel ignored and disadvantaged and apprehensive and like there's no hope for the future. And that's because I think the system is demanding too much of women, because it's demanding women act like men, think like men. And they just don't. I mean, there was a trend of Zoomer TikToks about 2 years ago where women were crying into these sort of short form diaries online saying that they felt overwhelmed and overworked and that they don't have time to see their friends, they don't know any of their neighbours in the city they've been forced to move to for work, they don't have time to date, dating apps themselves are exhausting, they feel that they're basically turn themselves into an Amazon product listing, they're just endlessly swiping, that they don't have any meaningful connections, and they don't see what the point of working is anymore. And I empathise. Men have an insatiable drive to achieve and to prove themselves, usually to women, but also to themselves. Women don't have the same mentality, and to try and force them into the same thing is just making them feel miserable. And that misery is translating into radical politics. For example, Gen Z women are significantly less likely to say they are proud to call themselves British than Gen Z men, 53% compared with 68%. So even though Britain, the British government, remember Keir Starmer, his ex-girlfriend, founded the charity Tender that was working with adolescents. He hosted the creators in Downing Street. Even though the British government is pathologizing white men, even though they per capita commit much less crime, they pay more taxes, they have a positive opinion of women. To their detriment, I would say they have one of the most anti-prejudicial attitudes towards foreign groups in the Western developed world. We should be a bit more discriminatory, given, men like this are in our country. Despite that, the state absolutely hates white men, and yet white men are still proud to rescue their heritage from being claimed as the exclusive property of the British state that hates them and that hates Britain, whereas young women have been taught to hate their own identity. And so no wonder they don't want to play their part in perpetuating our civilization by upholding and venerating our culture, by imparting it onto their children, by having children of their own, by having relationships with men, by participating in the local community and civic associations and charities, all the things that women did for centuries and were vital to having a vibrant, high-trust, beautiful country. Like, women make things beautiful. And now they've been taught to make everything ugly as an act of rebellion against the hypothetical patriarchy. And the act of rebellion is also not just to sterilize yourself and put those awful septum piercings in and shave your hair short, but also to import an actual patriarchal culture that treats women like dirt. This can't continue. It's just horrible for everyone involved. As Scarlett writes, these findings suggest a generation of women at odds with the country around them. Consistently, we've seen substantial differences along education, age, class, and ethnicity lines, as well as by how much time respondents spend online. And the difference here is that with the manosphere, a disproportionate share of those who like Myron Gaines or Andrew Tate and have a derogatory view of white women are the sons of the third world. They are black or from Southeast Asia, so Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. Whereas these polls are skewed heavily towards white women. These are middle class, well-educated, very online white women who are the heat map of moral concern from Jonathan Haidt's famous study. Men have their moral concern situated in the concentric circles of me, my immediate family, my extended family, my local community, my congregation, and my countrymen, my kin. Whereas women have theirs completely away from anyone in their immediate environment and are projecting their compassion onto the furthest possible thing from those who actually deserve their immediate concerns to either signal their virtue or because they've been taught that a general, all-encompassing love for all of humanity, and therefore anyone who doesn't feel that love is a particular group that must be shunned and penalized, like white men who love their own country and their own family, that is the way to be moral instead. These are completely opposed worldviews. You can't sustain this. So anyway, there are various polls on whether or not young white women feel that they belong to society versus young black and Asian minority ethnic women, and there's the disparity here that says, oh, young white women feel like things are more racist and the system is less set up for them, and that's because, ironically, of course, young black and minority Asian women in the country feel that they're the beneficiaries of the British state and they feel they belong here because they are the top of the intersectional totem pole that white women themselves buy into, but they're sort of mid-rank. And so there's no place for them, even in their own ideology. They're still blamed as the perpetuators of white feminism. They're still blamed as inheriting the historical guilt of slavery and empire and all of these other boondoggles that actually the British are way better at than everyone else. So there is no place for them in the worldview that they perpetuate. And they're feeling this. So Emily Lawford did a series of interviews for New Statesman with these women. So she spoke to a girl called Phoebe O'Brien, who is one of these like TikTok and Instagram political influencers. And she says, the Epstein class want you to hate every other group. Migrants, brown people, poor people, disabled people, trans people. Okay, yeah, Jeffrey Epstein. Just, evil, ethnic supremacist, involved in the trafficking of women and girls around the world. But I don't think it's the Epstein class that want me to hate this guy. I think it's his own actions that make me despise men like this. And the millions of other men around the world that act just like him, that we seem to be intent on importing, with, upwards of 50% of all the sex crimes in London now being committed by foreigners. More than a third of sex crimes in Britain are committed by foreign nationals. There's a serious sexual crime every hour recorded in London. This is just by people that never needed to be in our country, ruining the lives of our women and girls. I mean, the recent case on Brighton Beach with 2 Egyptian and an Iranian fake asylum seeker that brutalized a woman and broadcasted it on Snapchat. I don't think the Epstein class are misleading me to dislike brown people when they're doing this to women. It's horrible. Anyway, so the interviewer spoke to her, and O'Brien said she'd been teetering on the edge of an anxiety attack since the Epstein files dropped, and to quell her panic, she'd been working with other TikTok creators doing journalist-type things. So a lot of this participation in politics is a self-soothing activity. It's basically like adult colouring. A lot of this is to grasp some sort of sense of certainty or possession or a feeling of being in control. This is... When I was growing up, of course, Tumblr was all the rage. There was a spate of eating disorder crazes, self-harm. Then, of course, it became the gender thing. Like, I grew up at school when it was Cuts for Bieber, right? And a lot of this is women externalizing their feelings of anxiety and taking it out upon themselves. And I think this performative politics is a form of co-rumination and the externalization or venting of uncontrollable emotional pain. And the problem is when it translates into politics, then it has, because we're a democracy and it's one person, one vote, it has wider implications for everyone else. Currently, the wider implications are crazy because, as Visegrad has modelled, according to the recent YouGov polling, if only women aged 18 to 50 could vote, it would be a green supermajority. They would have 478 seats. Labour would be reduced to 84, because even the Labour Party, who are insanely woke, even they are not revolutionary enough for the young women that have been taught to hate men, love communism, and feel that unless you have an immediate solution to all of the abstract political problems that are their most pressing concern right now, that they're going to have a panic attack. My theory seems to be validated here because, as the author writes after their interviews with the young women, many young women talked about empathy. Women have more of it than men, they said. Greta Thunberg stopped eating as a child because of climate anxiety. Sally Rooney said in a speech in March that solidarity with Palestine was the only way to fend off despair. But it wasn't just celebrities. Every woman I spoke to seemed to feel this way. And they go, of course, not every young woman is progressive, but the trend is stark. The New Statesman's polling showed that Gen Z women were more likely to support causes such as feminism, environmentalism, and anti-racism than young men. I mean, if you just look at the university campuses, Thea's done some polling here at Cambridge for the Cambridge University Club and for the Labour University Club, and over 50% of them are going to support Greens. The Greens, again, want to legalise prostitution and every drug, enforce a driving test every 5 years, ban horse racing, ban dog ownership in public places, and also have complete open borders, and abolish the Home Office, but not for based reasons. So this is just demented. And as Thea points out as well, that the Greens are just the most die-hard pro-trans party. They believe that you can change your sex in any given second and walk straight into a woman's domestic abuse shelter, a changing room, a women's sports, even if you've got your tackle and two veg intact. This is all against women's interests, and yet they're going to vote for it in droves. And it's because they want to quell their anxieties. As the author says, not caring about the news is inconceivable to the progressive women that she met. How could others not be progressive? How could others not be angry? They want collective affirmation. So they spoke to a girl called Anna. She said, when Anna talked about sex, I was struck by how she almost sounded like the American writer Andrea Dworkin, an insane feminist. Like O'Brien, the influencer, Anna connected her radicalism to the inherent pain of being female. I was not far off how previous generations of feminists might have connected their politics to gendered violence. But the root of younger women's complaints didn't seem to be simply misogyny. It was far more amorphous, touching on almost everything about capitalism, about Britain, about their lives. This is what Carol Hanisch described as the personal being political, because the phrase came from the fact that feminist discussion groups always descended into therapy circles, talking about their feelings and their personal lives and how they felt physical pain because of all the various ailments that they had. Because, of course, I mean, lots of women have internal processes. As a man, your body is very consistent until something explicitly goes wrong, and then you go to visit the doctor because your wife nags you to, or you just sort of duct tape a bit that's fallen off back on. Whereas women are almost consistently divining the runes to try and figure out why they're tired, why they're hungry, whether or not they might be pregnant, why their periods, like all these things. It's a constant process of interpolating mystery, like almost like reading the entrails for prophecies. And so this feeling that there is something mysterious to the world that awaits to be revealed to them translates into things like astrology, and it also seems to translate here to politics, that if they feel anxious, there must be a pressing existential political matter that demands their attention. Anyway, she said to the author, Anna's politics have become more radical during the long process of getting personal independence payments, PIP, for her disability. Somewhere Max Tempers is shrieking. She felt the whole system was set up against her. The experience made her feel dehumanized. By the way, there are lots of these women that have these mysterious psychosomatic ailments, like chronic fatigue syndrome. They walk around with one crutch. And it's not just to scam PIP. They genuinely think that, and it's probably because of their diet, probably because of their anxiety medication, probably because they're on birth control, but they genuinely think they have these sort of chronic, undiagnosed conditions that society is oppressing them for not acknowledging, not affirming. When instead, it's just that their lifestyles are not ergonomic to the way their ancestors lived, and they are trapped in a system of unfulfilling relationships and poisonous politics that makes them feel constantly anxious, and that expresses itself as a form of chronic stress in inflammation. So a lot of it is about lifestyle and belief and the fact that you don't have people around you that care about you. You don't have this mysterious, undiagnosed illness that requires you to get a BMW from the taxpayer. Anyway, Anna felt the whole system was set up against her. I no longer feel politically aligned with this country, she said. She told me of all the accounts she follows online, and they're run by women or disabled or queer people. There is this real sense of panic and hopelessness. We have policies that aren't looking out for us. We have a government that doesn't seem to give a shit if a genocide happens. That's true, but that's mainly among the native population. Anna has a boyfriend who she described as a fucking Labrador. She has absolute contempt for the weak man who is orbiting her, and this is the tell. I think Anna would feel a lot happier if she had a man who had the capacity to say no, because the word no provides her with boundaries and security. Like, one of the things that my wife likes is when she is very worried about things, I will say, "Don't worry, I've got it," and she immediately relaxes. Or when she's trying to give too much leniency to someone in her life that is basically taking the piss, she is providing them with more grace than she would expect to be given herself, because she's quite hard on herself. I'll just say, "No, you're not being that generous to that person because you will be exploited." And so that ability to set boundaries is what makes women feel safe and attracted to you. Whereas this guy clearly doesn't believe in himself, and so he is so afraid of losing her that he will just be a doormat. And she doesn't want a doormat, she wants a man. Whether or not her ideology allows for it, she wants boundaries to be set. She wants to be attracted to someone that she feels has legitimate authority by the fact that he has strength and competence, but that he keeps her present in his mind, and so he always factors her into his priorities. And hey, I mean, again, I may not be an authority on this, but hey, my marriage is going pretty well so far, and she's miserable, so if there are any progressive women watching that hate my guts and have made it this far, just consider the standpoints of the people making these arguments here. He's reading books about how climate change isn't actually that big a deal. Okay, maybe I judged him too harshly. It's hard to separate from the fact that he's not really faced much adversity in his life as a straight white man who is privately educated, she says. I'm probably the adversity in his life. I think this is true, actually. I think you are probably giving him a hard time because you aren't attracted to him, and also you've been taught to pathologically hate men, even those you profess to love. When he and his friends talked about the world and politics, it sounded very different to the way she talked with her friends, who were all either female or non-binary. She couldn't imagine a group of men sitting around at the pub saying things like, "I'm really worried about the Department of Work and Pensions and what they're going to do to disabled people." Yes, because you shouldn't be married to the state. Like, you should be the primary benefactor of your husband's hard work. The government shouldn't be the primary benefactor of your husband's hard work and then act as intermediary to take that wealth and redistribute it to people who sit on their arse all day. Random indolent immigrants that we're spending £15 billion a year on, universal credit for, in addition to all the other benefits like social housing and healthcare and hotels for illegals and the increased cost of the criminal justice system, which isn't doing its job anyway because total freaks like this keep coming into the country. Anyway, so you should be relying on your husband rather than welfare payments from the government, because your husband actually cares about you and the government doesn't. It just sees you as a client group to bribe to continue to grow its own power, and the other client groups that it's bribing and bringing into the country are actually preying on you, whereas your husband will protect you. Anna said she didn't want to seem like a man-hater, but I do kind of feel like the more revolutionary spaces that I'm drawn to are primarily led by disabled and queer people, that they're spaces and groups of people from the fringes of society that understand the need for change because they're living through a time that is really tumultuous and difficult. I don't see that being a priority, particularly for straight, white, able-bodied men. Okay, because you have no empathy extended to them. Like, if you had your empathy in order, if you would like to project your empathy onto a group, perhaps project your empathy onto the young English girls that are being preyed on by men who do not need to be in the country, because they actually deserve all of your sympathy, because they are the victims of circumstances they had no say in, and they didn't bring any of these problems on themselves. Instead, you seem to be focused on a kind of what has been dubbed bio-Leninism, where people with perverse sexual appetites and a strange relationship to their own biological sex, and people who, some through no fault of their own, but others because they believe they have these strange, vague illnesses, and so self-identify as disabled in order to get money from the government, form a coalition of resentful revolutionaries that want to overthrow society out of spite for normal people. And that's just what you've articulated there. How dare the straight, white, able-bodied men who actually really care about women and just want to get married and have kids not be obsessed with queer liberation or reparations for black people who are never enslaved, or Israel and Palestine. When I asked women what specifically had radicalized them, the war in Gaza was the most common answer. This spring, I went to Leeds to meet Ash, who was part of the university's Palestine Solidarity Group. The group was made up of mostly women, she told me. They organised Gaza fundraising events like bazaars and drag shows. Drag shows for Palestine. Again, this is just proof you know nothing about the region. And attended regular Sunday morning pro-Palestine marches through the city. Reminder, Tel Aviv has like one of the biggest gay pride parades in the world. That is not a positive thing, I would like to reiterate. So if you're going to really celebrate gay stuff, you're probably on the wrong side of the conflict. But part of this, again, is women seeing the horrors, of course, of civilian casualties in Gaza, and they're projecting their compassion onto those infants and those mothers, rather than having children of their own, which properly confines those emotions to a locus of their own control. Because the problem is, if you're projecting this compassion onto a conflict in a faraway land, you actually aren't doing anything for them. Like, you can't stop the conflict. But in your own household, you can raise your own child. You can ensure their well-being. You can ensure that your husband is happy and that he takes care of you. You can ensure that you have a generation of your own children, your grandchildren, your extended family that they marry into, that are all around you when you fall on hard times. But for all of your aid work to Gaza, by putting on drag shows, when you are suffering and struggling, are Gaza going to raise a fundraiser for you? No. So your priorities are skewed here, and that plays into your anxieties because you feel personally insecure, because you are doing nothing to secure your own future by building a healthy relationship with the men that you think are at fault for all of the problems that you're attaching your anxieties onto, but I don't think they actually cause them. I think they're simply an outlet for you to anchor these vague feelings of uncertainty and panic onto. When actually I think it's just that your life and your beliefs aren't making you feel safe or happy. The Solidarity Group had raised more than 7,000 this year to support Palestinians. Nothing for the English girls, of course, being abused by Pakistani Muslim men, but there you go. Still, she felt anxious that she wasn't doing enough to help. I feel a lot of guilt, even though I didn't commit any war crimes, she says. Politics was Ash's whole life. It shouldn't be. Like, I have to pull myself out of politics sometimes to spend time with my wife, you know. We've just started replaying Mass Effect. She's never played it in the evening, and I haven't played a video game for years because I gave my whole life to politics for a while. And it's not good. Like, you need to take walks in nature and maybe rather than a Labrador boyfriend, get a good man and then a dog. Like, these sorts of things. You shouldn't spend your entire life on politics. It isn't healthy. You will succumb to nihilism because the Epstein class was mentioned earlier. I don't think accountability is coming for them anytime soon, and that can make you feel despondent. But instead, what you should do is, again, resituate your locus of moral concern to your family, and therefore feel angry about the lack of accountability for the Epstein class or the grooming gang scandal, rather than despair at the fact that this is the only thing in your life, and actually you're not that big a part in the overall machinations of the system. And so, if you don't have that much control over the thing that's apparently most important to you in life, you will of course feel despair. And that's why you shouldn't make it your entire life. Anyway, she says, when she met up with her friends, they talk about their lives, but it would always return to politics. She didn't like the UK, she was scared of racism and the far right, and outside of her female friends, she didn't think people cared about the issues that mattered most to her. There's nothing for me in this country. She told me she didn't have any plans for the future. I kind of put my personal life and personal goals and personal advancement on the side because I'm involved with these Palestine things. If I can do something to make someone else comfortable, I should. No. You should do something to make yourself feel safe and secure and happy. Again, I know people have soured on Jordan Peterson over the last few years. I mean, we can pray for his recovery because he's very unwell at the moment, but because he's taken various stances on political issues since joining the Daily Wire. Nevertheless, 2018, 12 Rules for Life. 2 very good bits of advice. Speak the truth, or at least do not lie, and treat yourself as somebody who is worthy of helping. Because if you are in a fit state, if you have yourself together, if you have your emotions in check, if you have your priorities in order, then you're more capable of helping other people. Clean up your own bedroom before going out and ordering the world. It's just a very simple principle that will give you tranquility. Ash first noticed that the men felt the impact of the war less keenly when she lived on 2024 encampments outside the Student Union. This was after one May evening where Israel struck a Palestinian camp in the southern Gaza Strip and killed 45 people. Ash remembers watching videos of the attack feeling cold and hopeless. Several women began openly weeping. The male students, meanwhile, were preoccupied with planning the next day's protest. Quote, I feel like sometimes men don't feel the gravity of the thousands of people that have died. Men have to take a step back to actually see the situation and empathize with the person, but they don't. If the system is set up for you to benefit, it doesn't really matter. That's not what it is. What it is you are thinking that men and women are alike, and they're not. This is anyone who's been in a relationship knows this is something you have to learn, is when women are talking about a problem, they just want to vent, and they just want to be told it's okay. And you do have to filter some of it out, otherwise you'll get frustrated as a man about listening to something that you are told not to fix. Instead, you just have to say, don't worry, dear. If you want to provide a solution, you provide it at the end of the affirmation, or you just do it for her and don't tell her. Because she'll be happy that you've taken care of it. But what the men are doing here is the male response, which is, oh, there's a problem, we're going to fix it. We're going to get on with the practical things, because actually the emotions get in the way of being clear-eyed about the solutions. They take up time and energy that we can't afford if we actually want to solve the problem efficiently. Whereas the women feel unseen and unheard and misunderstood because the men aren't ruminating with them on their emotions. And what we're seeing, inadvertently, is politics becoming gender-coded. Because even the progressive men are hated by the women because they feel that even the inkling of male behaviour is toxic or oppressive or dismissive, and then if they become fully submissive, they're just Labradors and they're not worthy of women's time. They actually are attracted to masculine men. Whereas the men who don't lie and are self-assured and have standards are just gravitating towards the furthest right party possible, which in Britain is at the moment Restore, which in America is increasingly this sort of splinter faction between America First and the people that have came in and called themselves MAGA despite being anti-Trump for many years. All across Europe, it's National Rally, or to an extent AfD, but that's only because Germany's constitution doesn't allow you to have anything further to the right than a party led by a lesbian with a Sri Lankan wife. Freedom Party in Austria, like, you can go down the list. Whereas, as we've seen from John Byrne Murdoch's reporting in the Financial Times, women are voting overwhelmingly, for example, in Germany, for Die Linke, the trans communist party. Like 25-point gap compared to, I think it's like the 4-point gap that young men are voting for AfD compared to the national average. The piece finishes with, these women's growing isolation could have profound long-term consequences for British society. It will almost certainly make relationships harder. Fewer than half of young women feel young men understand them. Young women are much less likely than men to date people who disagree with their politics. People will get lonelier and angrier, and it's getting worse. Among those under 30, younger women feel the bleakest. Women under 25 are most likely to believe things are stacked against me no matter how hard I try. And so the gap between perception and the state bending over backwards to make these women beneficiaries of the system is massive. And so we just can't continue going down this road of pouring endless resources into insatiable female anxieties because their priorities are askewed, and so those anxieties will never be quietened. Young men are seeking hierarchy, purpose, their proper place in a natural order. And that place doesn't just give them comfort or validation, it instead gives them duties and responsibilities, a calling to fulfill. So they have to consider other people. They want to make sacrifices. They want to take care of women and children. What women lack is a calling, a proper place. This is why they feel despondent and miserable that the system isn't working for them. Because it isn't. Because the system is doing what it thinks young women should be doing, which is being single and independent and working endlessly for a corporation that doesn't care about them and not having children, generating GDP to then redistribute to poor benighted minorities either at home or abroad. And that's making you miserable because it's not in your interest. Because you do actually have a proper place in a social network as a, hopefully, wife or a mother. Some will be called to vocational life, and that's something that has disappeared. So instead, you've got childless women turning to ideology instead and convincing other women to be childless because misery loves company. But you have a proper place as a mother. And The fact that you've been discouraged from that, the fact that you've been taught to hate the men that you will form healthy relationships with, the fact that you've been taught to derive meaning from being a Joan of Arc style martyr for abstract political causes which will not thank you when they succeed because their beneficiaries do not care about you at all. The fact that you have been told that that is what matters most in life, while it is making you miserable, is a disservice done to you. So, if you have women in your life like this, listen to their concerns, point out to them how their politics and their beliefs are not helping soothe their anxieties, are not building towards something meaningful that will make them happy, and then point out to them who did this to you, who benefits if you don't. And instead of being distraught about problems that you can't solve, reserve your compassion for the loved ones that deserve it, and then direct your anger at the people who tried to take that away from you.